Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard the Wright Flyer. I'm Randy Wright, and I'll be your captain on this solo flight special edition of our state of the art radio program. Folks, this will be the final boarding call, so if you please, claim your seats, fasten your seatbelts, kick back, relax, and enjoy the show while I go ahead and delve into the pre flight checklist, as there really is a lot of news and information to get to before I may fully indulge you with your in flight entertainment. Well, folks, one of the things that we have oftentimes decried on previous episodes of Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, is how we are now currently living in what can only most aptly be described as the post truth era. Both of the mainstay political parties are moving forward with an ulterior motive. They're attempting to bamboozle the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic and vibrant community of popular sovereigns of ours, we the people of these United States of America, and unfortunately, it shows no signs of improving within the foreseeable future. The reason for this is that they both are looking to exponentially expand the scope, power, breadth, but above all, influence of the federal government, far beyond what our founding fathers ever originally intended it to be when they sat down at Independence Hall in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, back in September of 1787 to give us the supreme law of the land. In fact, the longest standing constitutional document ever devised by the hands of men, yet divinely inspired by providence above. And of course, that document of which I speak is none other than our shared United States Constitution. You see, the Constitution was designed to not only define us both as a nation and people, but also to provide us with the proper scope and application of the federal government, as well as to lay out the fundamental and inalienable rights which were endowed to us by our Creator, who happens to be none other than the God of nature himself. And one of the things that comes to the surface of that, in fact, one of the most important rights that our founding fathers believe were endowed to us by our Creator, was that of not only the freedom of expression, but also the freedom of the press. But we have seen that the rank and file of the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media have been doing everything within their power to push forth a biased, and dare I say, propagandist narrative and agenda, one that is thinly veiled as anything other than the agenda of the frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftists. You see, they want to drastically, permanently, and dare I say irreparably, transform these United States of America away from being a constitutionally endowed federalist representative republic into some sort of frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftist dystopia torn straight from the pages of an Orwellian nightmare. This is something that my first officer, Jeremy Grapenton, and even our first Air Marshal, Mr. Nelson Ward, and indeed yours truly, have attempted to warn you, our cherished listening passengers and audience members, about over the course of the past approximate 2 years here at Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer. The reason that we've attempted to warn you about this is because it is something that, yes, if you examine the totality of the circumstances with a modicum of objectivity, it is clear to see that there is an unabashed media bias, slant, and tilt towards the left, but it is something that seems to be getting worse with each passing day. And we know that the Trump administration has been attempting to capitalize off of this, to turn any negative story, any negative account or reporting with respect to the 45th president of the United States into something that's fake news. You know, that's been the tagline by some of Trump's loudest surrogates and acolytes, that anything that is bad for Trump must be fake news. And of course, this enters into territory that is exceedingly dangerous. It basically walks right up to the edge of allowing propaganda in the form of that put out by the former propaganda minister of Hitler's Third Reich, Nazi Germany, that of Joseph Goebbels' tenets of propaganda, where they're using black propaganda. essentially going forth and saying, look, everything that is going forth from other sources are clearly erroneous. They have no connotation or no connection with reality, when in fact nothing could be further from the truth. This is all designed in point and parcel to bamboozle the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic of ours, we the people of these United States of America. That has been the end goal, and it's part of the reason why we here at Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, have decreed that we are living in the post-truth era. Not only are the political parties, meaning the mainstay two parties that have dominated the domestic sphere of American politics for well over a century now, engaging in subterfuge and obfuscation of the truth. But of course, it's going hand in hand with the rank and file of the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media. They're going out of their way to spin a narrative a certain direction, to put out a story that is not real. Now, yes, it will have what we could call a peppercorn or one iota of truth, but then they spin the narrative, they spin the story, they change the overall aspects, attributes, and meaning of what was being reported and conveyed in order to push a particular agenda. And of course, that's something that shows no signs of changing within the foreseeable future. And why should it? They believe that they've carved out a special niche in which they are able to control the narrative with respect to the entire system of American polity. I know that we have oftentimes reiterated this on previous episodes of Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, almost to the point of it reaching ad nauseum, but it is so on point that it bears repeating again here, that in the American system of polity and in the arena of American politics, perception, even if it is an erroneous perception, a false perception, a lie, in fact, an all-out lie, it doesn't really matter. It oftentimes matters more than reality. And that's because it's as the great visionary Zygmunt Dobbs warned us in his magnum opus of Keynes at Harvard back in the 1950s and 60s. He explained that the frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftists would do anything within their power to infiltrate the upper echelons of polite society, that they would seek to incrementally transform the United States, changing the approach that we have to politics, thereby completely and irreparably transforming us away from being a constitutionally endowed federalist representative republic into that Fabian socialist dystopia in incremental fashion. You see, they realize that they can't do it in one fell swoop with the snap of a finger. Rather, they realize that it's going to have to be drip by drip, step by step, in incremental and incessant fashion. And of course, this is the course and trajectory that they have set for themselves over the course of the past 150 plus years, folks. And they're not going to stop. They see absolutely no reason to rein this in, no reason to bring it back. In fact, they believe they see a light at the end of the tunnel, and that means that their victory is within grasp. Therefore, it falls upon our shoulders in our capacity as United States citizens to stand shoulder to shoulder in solidarity and unity and reject this nonsense and drivel that has been foisted upon us. But when you have a mainstream media that goes forth and just spews propaganda, deliberately obfuscating the truth, selectively reporting the facts, tarnishing the facts in some cases, it makes it difficult to hold our government accountable. Now, I'm sure some of you may be wondering why the hell I am bringing up this notion of holding the government accountable, accountability. I know that we have mentioned on previous episodes of our state-of-the-art radio program that the two fundamental pillars that form the bedrock foundation of American culture and society are that of self-accountability and self-responsibility working in tandem, thereby delivering unto us self-determination is so important. But you see, it goes deeper with respect to a free press. Our founding fathers wanted a free and open press. In fact, one of the first intolerable acts that the colonists began to push towards that long, drawn out, bloody affair known as the American War of Independence over was the attempt by the Central Parliament and Crown of Great Britain to censure and to censor in totality the pamphlets and newspapers of the colony. Therefore, anything that was speaking in negative fashion against Mad King George and the British Parliament would be closed and would be punished severely. Our founding fathers believed that in order for us to be a virtuous people, in order for us to be a strong, vibrant, and dare I say, robust republic, we would have to have free access to an unfettered dissemination of information. After all, our founding fathers viewed the central government as nothing short of a necessary evil. In other words, it was an untrustworthy thing. It was a thing that we really shouldn't just hand carte blanche over to have the ability to micromanage the facets of our daily lives. And of course, when you stop and think about that in an objective fashion, it makes complete and total sense. The government is the least well-equipped entity to handle the various and diverse conditions and requirements of this vast nation of ours that stretches from one ocean to another. And they also realized that the natural order of things, what we refer to as the natural law tenets, that which is inscribed on the heart of every human being and can be understood by the general application of human logic and reasoning, required that government be a non-intrusive thing. In fact, if you recall, the entire war for American independence was waged against the consolidated and centralized power and authority of the Crown and Parliament of Great Britain. So our founding fathers did not want this Leviathan, out of control administrative state that hampers modern America. They would be aghast at what is happening in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic and vibrant community of popular sovereigns of ours. But above all, they would wonder how it is that the land of the free and the home of the brave would ever allow this type of Leviathan and out of control administrative state to ever take root in this land. Well, part of it comes down to obfuscation. The media and free press is something that is guaranteed by the clear and concise language of the First Amendment to the Bill of Rights or the first 10 amendments to our shared United States Constitution. It was so important, so vital to our founding fathers that they put it as the First Amendment. And the reason behind this is that the First Amendment guarantees that the press has free access to the government to report on the activities of the government. This is because in their infinite wisdom and foresight, as well as in their boundless sagacity, our founding fathers fully realized that the natural state of government would be to enter into a stage of entropy, where it, by its parasitic nature, would attempt to encroach upon, abridge, belittle, and undermine the fundamental and inalienable God-given rights of the American people. And when we look at the damn near poetic language that opens the preamble to our shared United States Constitution, we see that our founding fathers started that document in clear and no uncertain terms to fully recognize who it is that owns this government, who it is that represents the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty in this republic, and it starts with we the people of the United States. You see, our entire government operates on a notion that we, in our capacity as United States citizens, delegated certain, and I need to emphasize this, limited powers to the government. In other words, the federal government cannot operate in legitimate form and fashion without being able to trace their governing authority back to a power that was specifically enumerated to it by the clear and concise language of the supreme law of the land, which, pursuant to Article 6, Clause 2, what is known in the common American vernacular as the Supremacy Clause, is none other than our shared United States Constitution. You see, again, this harkens back to that old adage that the United States of America is a nation of laws and not of men. In other words, that due process under the law and equal protection under the law applies to us in our capacity as United States citizens, irrespective of whether we are natural born citizens or naturalized citizens. So long as we have availed ourselves to the jurisdiction and coverage of the supreme law of the land, it applies to us equally. And again, what we see occurring within this modern system of American polity is the creeping type of soft despotism that that great French philosopher and admirer of America in her halcyon days, Alexis de Tocqueville, said. He basically warned us and cautioned us of this. He said that anyone who supports socialism is supporting a soft despotism, is pushing for a new age form of feudalism. And I know that I have oft-times reiterated this on previous episodes of Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, but here's the thing. When you try and go towards socialism, you are creating feudalism. It's because feudalism is that medieval caste system in which there were three separate and distinct parts of class or society in which it was virtually impossible to cross over. The three classes were those who worked the lands, the landless peasants. They were what was known as villains. In fact, that original term meant landless serfs. They had to ask permission to work the land, ask their landlord permission to collect timber, ask their landlord's permission to leave, ask their landlord's permission to marry. They controlled and micromanaged the facets of the daily lives of their subjects. And yes, that is how it was played out. But the pecking order included the other two. That is, those who rule, the king and nobility, the landed nobles, and those who handled matters of the soul, the ecclesiastical branch, the church. These three branches, as I said, were static. That meant that there was really no crossover. There was no opportunity available, generally speaking, for people to cross over. Now, of course, were there rare outliers and exceptions to the general rules that existed at the time? Well, yes, look at Thomas à Becket of England. He had started off as a commoner, and with the rise of the mercantilist system, which would eventually evolve into the capitalist free market system, yes, a burgeoning middle class began to develop, but that was not the way that feudalism worked. And in fact, that was what ultimately undermined feudalism. But when you have these high and mighty, arrogant, haughty type of people that believe that socialism is the right answer, they are trying to hearken back to such a time as that. And whenever you have draconian and overzealous governmental regulations impeding, hampering, and basically obstructing the ability of the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic of ours, we the people, to carve out a living for ourselves, you see that the middle class begins to fall into disrepair. And you see, one of the other things that is not very articulately discussed, at least by the so-called right-wing punditry and commensurate, is how the media has basically been remiss in their duties of being watchdogs for the American people. There is no doubt in my mind, and no doubt in any of our minds, that the media has had for generation after successive generation a truly open and obvious bias, slant, and favor towards the frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftist controlled Democrat Party. We have seen this for generations now. And yes, the so called right wing punditry and commensurate has lamented this fact. They have dedicated hour upon hour of radio time, television time, and internet space to this topic. But what they fail to do is to discuss how both sides of the political aisle have been utilizing this as a way to exponentially increase the breadth, scope, power, but above all, control wielded by that leviathan of an administrative estate, or state rather, that is in no way, shape, or form accountable to the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty, we the people. It's one of those inescapable and self-evident truths that has been haunting modern American politics for far too long now. And basically, in the wake of that disastrous debacle and fiasco known as the 2016 presidential election cycle, we see that things have gone from bad to worse, and it shows no signs of improving within the foreseeable future. But let's go ahead and take a look at some of the stuff that has come forth and that needs to be discussed with regards to all of this, because it is there. It is that inescapable, self-evident truth that has been haunting us for so long. This comes out of the Daily Wire, in which John Nolte published on May 22nd of 2017, and it says, unreliable sources, CNN caught lying about Fox News. And it goes on to say that the bitterness and frustration over at CNN continues to explode. Now, that should come as no surprise to anyone. CNN has been struggling for quite some time now to get ratings. They've been losing ratings, and it shows no signs of improving for them. Irrespective of what they try, they're unable to regain a sense of honesty and integrity. And the reason for that is no one believes them. They have been lying about everything. It is just getting worse with no signs of it improving. And so there is this air of desperation over there at CNN that gets worse with each passing day. They literally don't know how to recover from this, and that is part of their own making. That is part of something that they are really going to try and struggle to overcome. But it goes on. Nolte went on to say that now that Fox News is collapsing into a growing brand quagmire of its own stupidity, CNN was expecting to prosper, to blast out of last place, to finally win the big casino after going all in with 2 years of hard left coverage. Now, folks, part of the reason that Fox News is basically suffering right now is because of that slew of scandals. Whether it was with the late Roger Ailes sexual assault scandals, whether it was with the disgraceful departure of the flagship face of Fox News, that of Bill O'Reilly, it doesn't matter. Because what comes to the forefront with respect to all of this is that essentially their credibility is shot. There's an old adage that says credibility can take a lifetime to build and can be lost in but an instant. And that is certainly what has happened to Fox. We know that Fox had dominated the ratings of the cable news network wars because it was the first time that they attempted to at least walk back some of the left-leaning bias. However, in the wake of the disastrous debacle of the 2016 presidential election cycle, it shows me that they threw it all in for Donald Trump. That they basically wanted to support him no matter what came to the surface. And that goes back right to the primary process. It's something that cannot be ignored. It cannot be discarded because it shows us beyond the shadow of a doubt, or beyond a shadow of the doubt, that there was this attempt to skew the reporting. You remember that Fox News' slogan, ever since they first went onto the air, I believe back in 1995, was that of being fair and balanced. We report, you decide. But that's not the way that it came out during this 2016 election cycle. Things just were going out of control. Things were going off the rails. We were getting away from being an open and honest society. And it tells me, beyond all else, that again, the rank and file of the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media were not living up to the duties, obligations, and responsibilities that were bestowed upon them by the guaranteed free press from the First Amendment, because they wanted the government to be fine under Obama. But now that the Fabian socialist leftist controlled Democrat Party has been replaced by the second, maybe less enthusiastic big government party, the Me Too party of socialism, the gutless opposition party, or GOP, now all of a sudden they've found their journalistic credentials and recall that their duty, obligation, but above all responsibility is to be a watchdog for the American people. You know, it just speaks and drips with hypocrisy. The media is hip with hypocrisy, and it has been for a long time. But the thing that the so-called right-wing punditry and commensurate has been just god-awful with is pointing out how we resolve this. They offer or proffer up no solutions to the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic of ours, we the people. And that's because they too don't want it to go away. It's not that they're movement conservatives, it's that they have their own narrative, their own ulterior motives, their own agenda to push forth. And I think that the American people are getting sick and tired of this agenda that is about lining their pockets, this type of materialistic greed that exists within the so-called right-wing punditry and commensurate. And unfortunately, it shows, again, no signs of improving within the foreseeable future. But that being said, we in our capacity as United States citizens have the ability to correct this. And that is certainly what is happening over there at CNN. Because as Nolte goes on to say, remember that CNN was expecting to prosper, to blast out of last place, to finally win the big casino after going all in with 2 years of hard left coverage, 2 years of being the social justice network that openly calls for race riots, and this is Nolte saying this, lies about everything, and is not very subtle in its push to see President Trump assassinated. This kind of chicanery is ridiculous. It's why we here at Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, have gone out of our way to say that we don't want the president to fail. Now, there can be no mistaking the fact that we are not the biggest fans of Donald J. Trump. But we never want the president to fail, because that means that we would be no different than the rank and file of the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media who openly cheer, openly desire, openly push for the complete and total collapse of these United States of America, both as a nation and people. That is suicidal. That is stupid. That is outright crazy. And it is not something that we can afford to allow to come to fruition. And that is part of the reason why we say that it is imperative that you, our dear, cherished listening passengers and audience members, foster that fluent and working knowledge and understanding of our shared United States Constitution, and thereby your fundamental and inalienable God-given rights, because that gives you the ability to empower yourself, to look at exactly what it is that is ailing and afflicting this beloved republic of ours and put your foot down and say enough is enough, that we're not going to allow you to drastically, fundamentally, and dare I say irreparably transform these United States of America away from being a constitutionally endowed federalist representative republic into some sort of frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftist dystopia. But that's where we are. The media has been lying to us, and it shows no signs of changing. They don't want to change. When they're faced with these disasters, they basically double down on the failed discussion and talking points that they have been pushing for so long now. And it's all they know how to do. It goes back to the way that they are educated in the ivory towers of academia from coast to coast and border to border in this country. It has been a narrative and an agenda that has been pushed by the salivating mainstream media dating back to the turn of the 20th century with the rise of the newspaper conglomeration of William Randolph Hearst. Yellow journalism, sensationalism, all of these things work in tandem, hand in hand, to try and promote a narrative that really has no connotation or connection with reality. But it doesn't stop there, folks. With the emergence of social media and the internet, the click-driven, for lack of a better term, media apparatus has made it to where they go so far as to sensationalize headlines to try and aggregate people to their sites. You know, one of the masters and early wizards with respect to this was Matt Drudge. Matt Drudge doesn't do any original reporting on his own. He aggregates certain news articles and rewrites the headlines, thereby bringing traffic to it. And it was it was a system or policy or algorithm that truly worked for him. And it was a way for conservatives to get their news, but even he started dabbling in ulterior motives, that he was pushing an agenda of his own that didn't necessarily align with conservatism. Now, I know that I have covered this on previous episodes of our State of the Art radio program, but remember, back in the 2012 presidential election cycle, Matt Drudge, like his dear friend, little orphan Yap Yap Annie Coulter Toto the Floozy, had thrown their weight behind Mitt Romney. And therefore, he would bury stories that were negative towards Romney, and then it reached a new height in this most recent presidential election cycle of 2016, where he would Photoshop images of the varying opponents of Donald Trump during the primary process, in which there were 17 candidates in total. And he would go out of his way to besmirch and to smear and engage in base character assassination against these various candidates. Think of the way that he was giddy and gleeful to try and make Ted Cruz look like a whacked out Christian fundamentalist. And that may have been part of the reason why the so-called evangelical voting bloc had decided to go with Trump. They decided that the lesser of two evils mantra came up here. And part of that was also because Drudge and other various outlets within the rank and file of the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media attempted to paint Cruz as lying Ted Cruz. That was the line that Trump had created in order to throw out as red meat and subterfuge, to energize his base, to engage in the most base and awful form of politics and of campaigning that we have seen within recent memory. This was a very heated and very contentious election cycle, and I think that the ramifications of this are still rippling through the body politique of this once thriving and flourishing representative republic and vibrant community of popular sovereigns of ours. The consequences of this cannot be ignored. Yet, those who have been so rather artfully, although I use that term loosely, pushing for a tyranny of false unity, are beginning to change their tune. No longer is it about drain the swamp. It now becomes moral relativism, which is nothing short of situational relative, morality. Some things are moral depending on the person that's doing it, the characteristics at the time, the factors that apply to any given scenario and situation. But that is not the way, rather, that our founding fathers believed that this nation should operate. I'm again reminded of that sagacious advice of that stalwart and outspoken founding father of ours, Sam Adams. And I'm going to paraphrase here, but essentially what Sam Adams said was, in order for the United States to be a strong, vibrant, and robust representative republic, the people had to be a virtuous people. In other words, the people have to live by a high code or high standard of morality that is to be able to differentiate or to distinguish between that which is right and that which is wrong. Well, how do you do that when you dabble in situational morality? That means that the goalposts are always moving with respect to that which is right and that which is wrong. This is something that the frothing at the mouth, Fabian socialist, leftist controlled Democrat Party has engaged in for generation after successive generation. And we now see that it is plaguing the gutless opposition party, or GOP. This is why both parties are essentially diametrically opposed to the hopes, dreams, and future aspirations of the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty, we the people. Again, this is why we must awaken ourselves to the clear and present danger that is moving against our fundamental and inalienable God-given rights. And as Jeremy has stated so often on previous episodes of our state-of-the-art radio program, without our fundamental and inalienable God-given rights, we are truly left with nothing. This is the inescapable truth that rises to the surface in repeated fashion, almost to the point of it reaching ad nauseum. Ladies and gentlemen, we have to be vigilant, proactive, and unwavering in the maintenance and safeguarding of said fundamental and inalienable God-given rights. But going back to the way that the media has been throwing out subterfuge to obfuscate the truth, to push an open and obvious media bias, let's look back at this report from Nolte. It's funny, he said it is MSNBC that took off. Remember, the most god-awful network, the one that used to have Keith Olbermann, that doofus, on it. Well, they are the ones that have shot to the top. Now, folks, that is a bit disconcerting. It tells me that there is a growing pushback with respect to what had started off as righteous indignation within the body politique of these United States of America. Trump basically assumed the two-dimensional caricature that the left attempts to pigeonhole the right with in this country, and that is beginning to create blowback. When the gutless opposition party, or GOP, fails to stand up to the president when he goes out of line with respect to the clear and concise language contained within the four corners of the supreme law of the land, or in other words, our shared United States Constitution, this creates the type of moral outrage and the disenfranchisement that so many, in fact, countless Americans are feeling with respect to the modern system of American polity, that it is a destabilizing attribute. It is destabilizing the body politique of this country and the foundations of our representative republic. And, it's interesting that we need to point out, we need to remind you that the Constitution makes it clear that we are supposed to be a republic. I've seen the term democracy thrown around in loose-knit fashion all too often. But Article 4, Section 4 of the Constitution states that all levels of government and all attributes of government should be operating in a way to preserve our representative Republican form of government. But people have been led astray by the historical revisionists that infest our ivory towers of academia from coast to coast and border to border, those that control our popular media and culture, and those who have infiltrated our media information sources and outlets to think that we're a democracy. I've seen this term utilized by both sides of the political spectrum. And again, it reminds me of that warning, that cautionary definition that Dr. Benjamin Franklin, one of the greatest founding fathers of these United States of America, gave us in his definition of democracy. He defined democracy as two wolves and a lamb voting for what's for lunch. As you know, a tyranny of majority begins to exhibit itself in that each and every time. It's an undeniable, self-evident truth. It is an inescapable attribute of what a democracy is. Democracy is nothing short of mob rule because it does not recognize the fundamental and inalienable rights of the sovereign individual. You see, sovereignty in this nation, part of what is so revolutionary about the development of the United States, in fact, what is exceptional about the development of these United States of America is for the first time in the course of human events, and that means all of world history, that a nation was based on the notion that the people, the body politique of the nation, were the true sovereigns. Before that, sovereignty had always been confined to a singular individual. This is why the coinage and currency of the old, medieval dynasties and royalties of Europe was called a sovereign. Why? It depicted the king. The king was sovereign. Now, in Great Britain, it had developed a little bit differently with the evolution of the natural law, which was first seen in the four corners of Magna Carta, which was signed in the summer of 1215 on a muddy field called Runnymede. Then the provisions of Oxford further strengthened that to be king and parliament, meaning that the king was not absolutist as he was in France or as he was in Spain. The king had to get permission from the subjects, but originally mainly just the landed aristocracy and nobility, to wage war, to raise taxes for the waging of war, and for all of the various designs and projects that he had in mind for his respective kingdom. But our founding fathers took it a step further. They did something that had never been attempted before, not even in the Greek polis system of direct democracy or in the Roman latifundia republic. And that is that there would be no royalty. There would be no aristocracy. Meritocracy would be the driving force of the United States. A free market system with a very limited central government. Because if you recall that some of the foundational documents, and I'm speaking in particular here of the Articles of Confederation, were designed to hamper the federal government. It was because each state was seen as sovereign, or at least as quasi-sovereign. And that is because they realized that based on the natural order of things, the fundamental building block of society is the family. And therefore, the closer that the government gets to the people, the ability of the people to exert more control over them, the more plenary or absolute the power of that government would be. Because the people could easily put the kibosh on it any time that that government attempted to become a rogue, tyrannical, and ultimately illegitimate force. Unfortunately, that is no longer taught in our ivory towers of academia from coast to coast and border to border. The historical revisionists, along with the Common Core standard bearers of education who want to dumb down the up-and-coming generations, and indeed those generations which have yet to be born, don't want our youth to understand this. Thus, they go about the process of indoctrinating them, of glorifying and hero worshiping villains such as Karl Marx, villains such as Vladimir Ilyich Lenin and Stalin. Now, they'll try to go out of their way and proclaim that no, they're not really doing that, that they're just trying to teach people to think. But we have seen the caustic miasma that has filled the nation's campuses from coast to coast and border to border, where they attempt to shut down anyone who exhibits a different point of view than their own. This type of myopia, this single nearsightedness that has engulfed our campuses like a conflagration is dangerous because it tamps down on the ability of the up-and-coming generation to engage in civil discourse. And if we recall, looking back to the foundational process of this, our beloved representative republic, the entire way that our nation even came into existence was that we engaged in civil discourse. The great compromise that created the bicameral or two-house system of government that we enjoy in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic was forged on the anvil of civil discourse. But that's not something that you see in this fast-paced modern society in which we live. And it is certainly something that the great visionary Zygmunt Dobbs warned us of in his magnum opus of Keynes at Harvard. And when we look at this, under the totality of the circumstances and with a modicum of objectivity, we must reach but one inexorable conclusion, namely that the left has pushed this post-truth era and that they are steadily and incrementally beginning to infiltrate the rank and file of the gutless opposition party, or GOP, to transform it from a party that once stood for strict adherence to the Constitution to nothing more than the mere Me Too party of socialism. Now, with opponents like that, with an opposition like that, or with representatives like that, who needs an opposition? Because they have essentially assumed the same mantle as the frothing at the mouth, Fabian socialist, leftist-controlled Democrat Party, just maybe to a different degree on the speed at which we implement the incremental push of this nation ever further to the left. We can ill afford to allow that to come to fruition. We can ill afford to ignore this because it is threatening to undermine all that we hold near and dear in these United States of America. But the interesting thing that Nolte points out here, he said it's sad. It just wasn't supposed to be like this. The selling of a soul is supposed to be worth something, isn't it? Well, no. That's the whole thing. Whenever we talk about the selling of a soul or doing a deal with the devil, it means that a false promise is put forth. That a carnival barker, a charlatan, a huckster, a snake oil salesman has set his sights on a mark and is doing everything within his power to delude that mark, to tell that mark everything that they want to hear, to take them away from good, to take them away from that which is ultimately nourishing the soul. So no, CNN should not have thought that by becoming a social justice network or hotbed, that this would somehow buoy them up or give them a greater standing or gain or garner them greater ratings. The American people are sick and tired of this. But the fact that MSNBC has skyrocketed to the top, that tells me that conservatives are tuning out. They're looking at the media and they're essentially saying there is no one filling in the niche for us, like Fox once attempted to claim they were doing. But this creates a dangerous vacuum. Because remember, part of what Sam Adams said we had to be was virtuous people. And to be virtuous, we have to be well endowed with knowledge. We have to understand and be abreast of the current events that are unfurling within the body politique of this once thriving and flourishing representative republic and vibrant community of popular sovereigns of ours. And that is something that becomes nigh impossible when we have no dissemination of information. And yes, fake news is a real problem. It is a calamity that is impacting in such a negative fashion this modern system of American polity. And again, it shows no signs of improving within the foreseeable future. Nevertheless, it is both sides of the political aisle or spectrum that have been engaging and weaving this web of deceit, throwing out subterfuge and red meat in order to energize a particular base, in order to further implement the tried and true, albeit threadbare, tactic and strategy of divide and conquer, thereby distracting the American people. You know, I've had a very dear friend of mine say that I was distracted with respect to all of the media reporting regarding Donald Trump. But here's the thing. She has also admitted to not reading the stories completely, that she doesn't know who to trust. I read all of the sources that I come by. I read between the lines. I engage in self-accountability and self-responsibility in tandem so that I can be self-determinant. And that was something else that that great French philosopher and admirer of America during her halcyon days, Alexis de Tocqueville, said. He said, yes, in a free press, you will always have the danger of there being quacks and radicals and cracks and cranks. But that in the United States, there was no fear of that, because the people were adjusted to it. They were used to it. They knew how to read between the lines, and therefore there was no fear of rebellion fomenting unless it was truly justified. But if you juxtapose that to the various nations in Europe at the opening decades of the 19th century, censorship was everywhere. Even in the so-called Free Republic of France, that then became the empire under Napoleon Bonaparte, it was not free. And the reason was because they could not run the risk of having a free press. After all, was it not the free press that had brought about the French Revolution? Napoleon had at one time proclaimed that he was an advocate of liberty, but he meant that only for those who wielded power. And in his mind, that did not belong to the body politique of the nation. That is why he crowned himself Emperor Napoleon. That is why France went from being a very unstable and tyrannical republic, one that was a far cry from what our republic was. And if you recall, that the French Revolution, starting in 1789, was heavily influenced by the American Revolution, that returning soldiers from the American Revolutionary War had decided that they would implement the same types of reforms that had begun here, but there was one major defining distinction and line of demarcation that differentiated the French Revolution from that of the American War of Independence, and that was with moral relativism. There was not a driving sense of natural law. Yes, they paid lip service to it with liberté, égalité, and fraternité, but they didn't truly mean it. They didn't truly devote themselves to it. And by 1792, they were in the grips of the Great Terror under Robespierre, Maximilien Robespierre, the anti-capital punishment attorney who magically decided that whenever he was paranoid, because he really was, with the Committee of National Sécurité, that he would go about executing anyone that he deemed a threat to the revolution. They went completely radical. They tried to demolish all of the fundamental pillars of French society, and that led to chaos. It ultimately consumed Maximilien Robespierre himself because, like Stalin, his Jacobin movement, or his sans-culotte, basically decided that they would kill anyone that they disagreed with until he targeted his own underlings, his own adjutants, his own right hand men. And in order to engage in self preservation, they sent him to the temple prison and him to the national razor or le guillotine. That is what always happens when it is thought that the government is some sort of an end-all be-all solution for the cornucopia and plethora of problems that faces any nation. All you have to do is spin the globe and look at anywhere that socialism or these tyrannical, despotic, authoritarian states have been tried, to see that each and every time they end in abject failure, or their people are miserable. And yet, that is what so many within this once thriving and flourishing representative republic of ours want to go back to. It's as though they feel that the authoritarianism will keep them safe, that it will provide them with something of the type of protection that they want, to the nanny state mentality, for lack of a better term. And what we have to do is get past that. We have to rededicate ourselves to the tenets of liberty, to that which has really propelled our nation to such lofty heights, and greatness in our relatively brief yet illustrious history here on God's green earth. But in order to do that, we have to basically foster that fluent and working knowledge and understanding of our shared United States Constitution, and thereby our fundamental and inalienable God-given rights. It means that we have to be ready, willing, and able to hold ourselves accountable for our words, deeds, and actions, to hold each other accountable for our words, deeds, and actions, and arguably most importantly, that we must be ready, willing, and able to hold our elected officials and our governmental officials accountable for their words, deeds, and actions as well. And I fully realize, as I'm sitting here speaking into this microphone, conveying this message unto you, our cherished listening passengers and audience members, that this is far easier said than done, but done it must be. And if there is any people on the face of God's green earth capable of accomplishing and achieving this lofty and noble goal, it is we, the people of the United States of America. We have overcome every hurdle, obstacle, and adversity that has been erected in our path during our relatively brief yet illustrious history here on God's green earth, and that is because for generation after successive generation, we had a firm grasp upon, a firm understanding of who we are, what our national heritage, character, spirit, but above all, identity is. Unfortunately, what we see with things like CNN and things like MSNBC, and to a lesser degree Fox, and even the so-called right-wing punditry and commensurate, is that for generation after successive generation, we have been getting away from that. We have been doing everything within our power to distance and divorce ourselves from the clear and concise language contained within the four corners of our shared United States Constitution. Now, folks, here at Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, we have always prided ourselves on being a bit different than any other radio venue or program out there. We don't just discuss the problems, we attempt to provide you with practicable, real-world solutions. And it's as we have said, dating back to our premiere episode, which aired on September 11th of 2015, that the key has been with us since the birth of our nation, some 235 plus years ago. That key, which will unlock the chains and shackles of governmental bondage, servitude, tyranny, but above all oppression, is none other than the supreme law of the land, or our shared United States Constitution. But in order to do that, the way you do it is to foster that fluent and working knowledge and understanding of our shared United States Constitution. And that's the thing. We have to spread the word about the Constitution. We have to get back to a working knowledge and understanding. And the way that we do that is we examine everything with a constitutional framework. We read the Constitution on a daily basis. We don't be afraid to engage in true conversations with respect to the Constitution. That ensures that we, both as a nation and people, are very well equipped to read between the lines, to see when there is fake news. Now, here's the amazing thing. Going back to this report, it says also, out of frustration, out of hysterical panic at being left behind by a cable network just as crazy left, as Nolte put it over there at the Daily Wire, we now have an increasingly desperate CNN talking about President Trump basically defecating on his desk. Why is this news? I honestly don't know. We have a dishonest CNN staffer fabricating Ivanka's $100 million Saudi slush fund. It was actually a World Bank fund. We have CNN going 24/7 on the Trump hatred, and now proving that if you lie about the little things, you will certainly lie about the big picture items. CNN has been caught red-handed lying about something as small and dumb as the tone of the Trump coverage over at Fox. You know, it's a little bit of the pot calling the kettle black. The leftist media has been doing with respect to Obama, being very friendly to Obama, with respect to how they attempted to assassinate the character of Ronald Reagan back in the 80s, or how they went after George W. Bush. That none of that is connected with reality. And so, again, they have become hip with hypocrisy. They're going to point the finger at Fox. And granted, we here at Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, were not happy with the way that Fox had been covering the disastrous debacle and fiasco of the 2016 presidential election cycle, going right back to the primary process, the opening stages of it, even. We remember that they first wanted to support the open borders type with El Jefe Jebe Bush. And when he started to flounder, then they went to Narco Rube EIEIO. But then ultimately, instead of going for the true dyed-in-the-wool constitutional compositionist, because they loathed and despised this idea of restoring power to the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty in this country, we the people, they threw their lot in with the New York billionaire, businessman, real estate tycoon, and all around vulgarian, and now 45th president of these United States of America, Donald J. Trump. They did it without vetting him. They did it without a consideration of the Constitution because, again, these dark, twisted, and dare I say, nefarious forces don't give a damn about the United States Constitution. They don't care that this is truly what propelled us to such lofty heights in our nation's relatively brief yet illustrious history. Yet that is the truth we face. That is the inescapable, self-evident truth that has been at the basis of this nation for generation after successive generation. And unfortunately, folks, it shows no signs of improving within the foreseeable future. And so what we have is across the board with media, but particularly even in the double-edged sword of social media, that there is this just conflagration to spin the news a certain way. And so it makes the task of the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic of ours, we the people, all the more difficult in getting out the truth. It means that we have to look at a wider array of sources and material. However, the irony of it all, which is not lost on me, is that we now live in an era where the Basically, all the world's libraries, all the world's news and media sources are just at the tip of our fingers. They're either on our smartphones or they're on our computers, and we are constantly connected 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year to this information superhighway, as it was called in its early developmental stages. And yet, at that time, we have also become complacent. We have begun to expect instant gratification. We have become slovenly and lazy when it comes to digging into this. Not all of us, certainly, but I'm just speaking in generality here, or in general with respect to this. That has been the trend that I've noticed. They'll parrot certain things, whether it's from Conservative Treehouse or Newsmax or what have you, without vetting the truth of it, without digging into it, and they don't read the other side either. And so that means that they're getting a very myopic approach, a very one-sided approach to the media. And this is on both sides of the political spectrum. This is part of the reason why our system of polity has devolved into a mere spectator sporting event, and that is something that we can ill afford to allow to go forward unchecked and unchallenged. Because when that occurs, we are not being the virtuous people that Sam Adams called on us to be. Instead, we are turning a blind eye to the shortcomings of our people simply because of the political party they choose to affiliate themselves with. It's not as though Donald Trump had been a lifelong Republican. The great weight of the evidence that is available on this great internet source that's out there, this great source and wealth of information, this font of information, for lack of a better term, we can see that he once said that he left the Republican Party because it was too crazy right. Then he was part of the Reform Party, but he left the Reform Party in 2000 because of former Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan, David Dookie, joining it. And then, yet in the 2016 election cycle, he said he didn't know who David Duke was. This irrespective of the fact that he had penned a New York Times op-ed article in 2000 explaining why he was leaving Ross Perot's Reform Party, and that at the crux of it all, the basis and reason behind it all, was the fact that David Dookie had joined the Reform Party, and that he just simply refused to associate himself with someone like that. But that raised the question, during the election cycle, why was it that he tried to obfuscate the truth with this? And again, it was because he wanted to garner the votes of that two-dimensional stereotype that the frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftists have always attempted to pigeonhole the right with in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic and vibrant community of popular sovereigns of ours. And unfortunately, folks, it shows no signs of improving within the foreseeable future. They're doubling down on these efforts. They are becoming even more radical and extreme, and the truth is the first victim of it all. Yet, as Scripture so aptly put it, ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall set ye free. That's what we have to be dedicated to. It shouldn't be about partisanship. We shouldn't be declaring loyalty to one particular political party. The only thing that we are called upon in our capacity as United States citizens to swear allegiance upon is the supreme law of the land, our shared United States Constitution. Yet you notice how little that's getting covered? You notice how little either one of the two mainstay political parties even brings up mention or regards to or reference to the supreme law of the land, which pursuant to Article 6, Clause 2, what is known in the common American vernacular as the Supremacy Clause, is none other than our shared United States Constitution itself. Folks, they are not interested in that. They are not interested in your hopes, your dreams, and dare I say, even your future aspirations. This is all a bunch of subterfuge. It is political kabuki theater at its worst, and it is getting worse with each successive passing day. And that's very unfortunate. Very unfortunate indeed. But it's more than this. It's interesting. They said, according to a new study from the Harvard Shorenstein Center on Media Politics that analyzed news coverage of the president's first 100 days and found that coverage, quote, set a new standard for unfavorable coverage of a president, with Fox News being the only outlet where the majority of the coverage was positive, close quote. Well, that's not entirely true. What it really came down to is that it said that basically it was more on a narrowly tailored question of fitness for office. And when it goes to overall news coverage of Trump, it is that Fox News was pretty fair with it, even though I didn't get that perspective of it. But according to the evidence, and that's what I'm going to go off of here, it was 52% negative at Fox and 48% positive. Whereas, on the other hand, CNN had 93% negative and only 7% positive. So when you have this, it shows that the media, yes, is literally going out there and attempting to obfuscate the truth, that they are just spinning a narrative and are trying to go forth with this. And unfortunately, that's something that makes holding this government accountable all the more difficult, because both sides of the political spectrum are basically attempting to push their narrative. They want their base to close their eyes to the complete and total picture. Now, I know that I myself have been accused of being distracted by these media things, but no, I bring them out into the forefront here, out into the light to be examined so that we can root out the truth. Part of getting to the truth is examining the great girth of the evidence that exists and determining that which is accurate and that which is false. But the only way to do that is to analyze it for ourselves, because clearly the supposed watchdog of the American people has been remiss in their duties, obligations, but above all, responsibilities. And that is something that we can ill afford to allow to continue unchecked in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic and vibrant community of popular sovereigns of ours. It falls again on our shoulders and our shoulders alone to be proactive in the maintenance and safeguarding of our fundamental and inalienable God-given rights. It is not something we can escape. It's non-delegable. It's non-negotiable. So we find ourselves here with all of these lies. And, you know, again, we here at Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, have not been that what I would call just grandstanding fans of Donald Trump. We have been skeptics of him because we recall that by his own fruition, he has admitted to never once reading the supreme law of the land from cover to cover, because by his own admission, he didn't find any intrinsic nor any inherent value in the document or in so doing. But I go to the Federalist, in which Daniel Payne published on 2013 13 more major fake news stories in just 5 months of Trump's presidency. On January 22nd, there was the Trump-Comey bromance, where they were attempting to say that everybody with them was just in love with each other, and that Trump was happy with Comey, but now we see that Comey's thrown out. But again, part of what the problem here is as we have warned over the course of the past approximate 2 years here at Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, that the 45th president of these United States of America, Donald Trump, has been consistent in only one attribute or one area. and that is that he is consistently inconsistent. Then there was the February 1st Neil Gorsuch's Fascism Forever Club. That just wasn't true. Basically, the UK Daily Mail had reported that Supreme Court nominee Neil Gorsuch had founded and led a student group known as the Fascist Forever Club in high school. The story made waves at news websites and on social media. US News and World Report, according to the Federalist, as well as The Nation, AOL, the AV Club, Salon, and Vice all fell for it, while writers and media personalities such as Bill Maher here, Gersh Kuntzman, Millhiser, and Olbermann all eagerly and credulously tweeted about it. But as it turns out, it wasn't true at all. Gorsuch had simply included the club as a joke in his yearbook entry. Much of the media couldn't simply wait to confirm this, however, leading to yet another hysterical fake news media cycle. Then there was February 17th, the mobilization of the National Guard, which was just ridiculous. Then there was February 25th, Kuwait's pay to play at Trump Hotel. Then April 11th, the Jeff Sessions filth scandal. This is where he gave a speech to border agents in Nogales, Arizona. And his remarks lambasted the international criminal organizations that turn cities and suburbs into war zones that rape and kill innocent civilians, and declared it is here on this sliver of land where we first take our stand against this filth. The line about filth, which obviously refers to the drug cartels and the gangs that have been engaging in just awful things. No, they tried to say that this meant just all Mexican people. It's the typical ridiculous identity politics that these people always engage in. Then there was the Ghosts of Billboards Past, which on May 1st, basically a fellow named Peter Brack claimed on Twitter that the president of the Philippines, Duterte, had received an invite to the White House around the same time that Ivanka Trump modeled in an ad for POTUS's new tower in Manila. The implication, of course, was that the two presidents were colluding in some pay-for-play scheme, but it turns out that the detail was that the billboard in question had come down years before, and the photo was years out of date. So again, this is the obfuscation of the truth, engaging in subterfuge to spin a narrative, and yes, that makes it difficult to discover the truth. And the media feeding frenzy that has just been rising to the surface time and again shows no signs of abating within the foreseeable future. Then it goes on to the DOJ persecutes a woman for laughing. That wasn't true. The non-existent beer party. I mean, folks, you can't make this stuff up. Rape is a pre-existing condition. That was the other one. The football analogy fiasco, the fake Rosenstein resignation scandal, Comey's Russian probe resource request, the Ivanka charity insanity as late as May 20th, and so on and so forth. So you see, folks, what we are coming down with here is that there is this orchestrated attempt to try and control the narrative, to spin it a certain way, to deny that it is, fake, to try and bamboozle the people. You see, this is what they have done for generation after generation, and it's not going to change. It's not something that they want to do. Because again, they think that this is how they can manipulate us, because that's what they've been able to do for all this time. Think back to Walter Cronkite, the way that he said, that's just the way it is, or those are just the facts, or whatever it was that he said to close his half-hour news show. It was ridiculous. Again, it had no connection, no connotation with reality. And they were able to mold public perception and public sentiment. And in fact, this goes right back to the newspaper conglomeration of William Randolph Hearst at the turn of the 20th century. Remember that in 1898, he basically turned American public sentiment in favor of former Secretary of the Navy Theodore Roosevelt's little war there in Cuba, the Spanish American War. He trumped up stories. He was essentially the father of yellow journalism, what we would refer to as sensationalism today. And that has been dominating the media for news cycle after successive news cycle. It's one of those inescapable truths. It's one of those things that keeps coming to the surface and the epicenter time and again. And unfortunately, they don't know how to get past it. They are set in their ways. They are not dedicated to the truth, yet they rather facetiously and speciously try to paint a picture of themselves as being these great advocates for the unadulterated truth, the unfiltered truth, the lack of spin. Remember that Bill O'Reilly, that now disgraced former host at the Quoff News Channel, I mean the Fox News Channel, had said that this is the no spin zone, except that he spun everything. This hip with hypocrisy notion that is gripping both sides of the political aisle, both sides of the political spectrum, is undermining the very foundations of this beloved representative republic of ours. And again, it is going to fall on our shoulders and our shoulders alone in our capacity as the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic of ours to put our collective foot down and say enough is enough. You see, that's part of what a free market system is about. We have the ability to vote with our feet. That is part of the reason why CNN is in such a tailspin. But I think that some of the ratings numbers are out of whack too, because what is not being discussed is how younger people are not continuing their cable news services or their cable in general. They're going online. The internet is becoming the vast source of information. Yet there are dangerous so-called fake news sites out there, such as Printly.com, such as Conservative Treehouse, to a lesser degree Newsmax, to the editorialization that we've seen engaged in by the Pravda of the internet, Matt Drudge. All of that serves to obfuscate the truth. It serves as an epicenter of subterfuge, which is all designed to bamboozle the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty, we the people. And unless and until we see through this and begin to root out the truth, we will not be free, because again, as scriptures so aptly put, ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall set ye free. That's not some small thing. That's not some outlandish or merely abstract notion. That is something that goes to the heart of the great litany of problems that we have been experiencing here in this beloved republic of ours. And unfortunately, it is something that shows no signs of improving within the foreseeable future. Why? Because we continue to look back at things and to be very, very close-minded with respect to it. And unfortunately, that too has no connotation with what helps us. It again just divides us, it weakens us, it places us in a very, very dangerous spot. And the only way that we overcome that is, as we have always said here at Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, and that is to foster a fluent and working knowledge and understanding of our shared United States Constitution, and thereby our fundamental and inalienable rights which were endowed to us by our Creator, who happens to be none other than the God of nature himself. Now, yes, I fully realize that this is far easier said than done, but done it must be. And if there are any people on the face of God's green earth who are capable of accomplishing this, it is we, the people of the United States. We have overcome every hurdle, obstacle, and adversity that we have ever faced, both as a nation and people. And what it really comes down to is an ability to root out the truths for ourselves, to base our society on something greater, to realize that the United States is greater than the sum of its parts. In other words, that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, and that thing that makes it greater than the sum of its parts is the fact that we have those natural law tenets that are immutable by their very nature, meaning they're just as applicable today as they were at the inception of this nation well over 235 years ago, as God willing they will be some 235 plus years from today. But to do that, to ensure that this experimentation in representational government is not in vain, is, not in vain. We have to foster that fluent and working knowledge and understanding of our shared United States Constitution, and thereby our fundamental and inalienable God-given rights. I know that sounds repetitive. I know it sounds abstract, but when we examine the great weight of the evidence under the totality of the circumstances and with a modicum of objectivity, that is the one inexorable conclusion that we must reach, both as a nation and people. And again, the way we do this is to stand shoulder to shoulder in solidarity and unity. It is to encourage our fellow popular sovereigns to read and engage in conversation with the Constitution. Because that is how you foster that fluent and working knowledge and understanding. And that is how you know the truth. That is how you find the truth. And remember that ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall set ye free. That, folks, is why it will never be too late to restore American prosperity in the land of the free and the home of the brave. When we are proactive about that, and when we do believe that that is a natural process of which we can understand by the general application of human logic and reason, then nothing can stop us. Nothing will be big enough to hold us back. Nothing will be able to impede us or to send us into a tailspin unless we ourselves allow that to come to fruition. Again, this is all part of the reason why we say that the two fundamental building blocks of American culture and society are that of self-accountability and self-responsibility working in tandem, thereby delivering unto us self-determination. Yes, it is a concerted effort on our part. Yes, it is going to be difficult, but I'm reminded of that old adage that nothing worth having ever comes easily. We have to exert the effort. We have to take the steps that are necessary and proper to achieve this, and in so doing, we secure the blessings of liberty for ourselves and for our posterity. In other words, for the up and coming generations, and indeed those generations which have yet to be born. That is our calling as United States citizens, as the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic of ours. Now, I know that the frothing of the mouth Fabian socialist leftists are going to make that difficult. I know that the pom-pom waving cheerleaders for the spectator sporting event that is modern American politics is going to make that difficult. But remember that the foundations of what they are pushing for are built on mere subterfuge. It's smoke and mirrors, it's two-card Monty, it's parlor tricks designed to bamboozle and to confuse. But when you have a solid footing in the foundational basis of this country, that is in the natural law tenets, that is in the foundational documents of the United States, but most importantly within our shared United States Constitution, nothing, and I truly mean nothing, can inhibit you, nothing can hold you back, nothing can prohibit you from reaching your greatest potential. That is an empowering message. That is what we here at Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, hope to endow upon you, our cherished listening passengers and audience members. Because when that is the course that we travel and traverse, both as a nation and people, that is when we are at our best. Again, that is when we are self-determinant. And remember that the United States of America is based on rugged individualism. That means that we don't just buy into things. And it's part of the reason why my first officer, Jeremy Grapenton, and I have oftentimes reiterated on previous episodes of our state-of-the-art radio program that we don't want you to take what we're saying here at face value. We want you to look into it for yourself as well. Check and see if the way that we are conveying events, with the way that we see current events unfurling in this nation, is with you. Is with the way you interpret it, is with the way that you have found it to be based on your own examination of the primary sources and the great weight of the evidence. Reading between the lines, reading all sources, and then discuss it with us. You see, we are dedicated to civil discourse because that is what built this nation. Now, with that said, it is time for us to begin our descent. I'm going to go ahead and send the flight attendant back with one last round of alcohol. Folks, she's not going to sell you fake alcohol, because if she did, you have my full permission to push her off the plane. As always, folks, I'm your captain, Randy Wright, and I want to thank you for choosing to fly the Wright Flyer. Should you have any questions, comments, concerns, or even topic suggestions, please feel free to leave them either in the comment section here on our YouTube page, or over on our Google Plus page, or even on our Facebook page. And on top of that, I invite you to follow us on Twitter with the Twitter handle at Radio Aviation EX. One more time, folks, that's at Radio Aviation EX. And there you will find the departure board that lists my personal Twitter account, as well as the personal Twitter account of my first officer, Jeremy Grapenton. You will find a link to our Blogspot account that is chock full of useful information. And just as you will find in the description section of today's program, you will find a link to the Cafe Press account. Folks, at the Cafe Press account, we have all sorts of trinkets, goodies, and novelty items, either with our original Radio Aviation Excellence logo on it, or our First Class Passenger logo on it, or even the two Uplifting America logos on it. And you will find these on coffee cups or mugs and thermoses, drinking glasses, shot glasses, clothing, apparel, jewelry, laptop sleeves and protectors, cell phone sleeves and protectors, you name it. We've got it there, and at all at reasonable prices. With such a wide selection and with such reasonable prices, you simply cannot go wrong with the Cafe Press account. Also, folks, if you have not already done so, please feel free to subscribe to us here. We encourage that. All subscribers are welcome here at Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer. After all, folks, we do this program for you. We couldn't do it without you. And we love to have your feedback, and we encourage it. Once again, folks, thanks for flying with us. We hope to see you again next time. Please do take care.